Hello, everyone. I'm so glad y'all were able to join today. Um, I am Dr. Rhonda Blackburn. I am the Senior Director of Academic Services and Client Success at Strut Learning, and have been working with competency-based for a while. And so this topic, we're going to really dive in deep on what are the things that you need to think about as you're developing a program. But with me, I have Ashley Nelson. So I'd like you, Dr. Nelson, I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ashley Nielsen. Currently, I'm the chair of the Individualized Masters of Arts program at Antioch University. But I have been working with competency-based education for a long time as well. And I'm also on a couple assessment teams. So rubrics are a big part of my life. So it's fun to join Rhonda and talk about them.
Yes. Um, hopefully, we should have maybe hopefully one more person joining us. And when she does, I'll have her introduce herself. But I just wanted to get started and dive in. So again, this is really about thinking about, you know, programs all the way down to how you determine those competencies, how do you determine how you're going to assess it, and then really diving deep into that rubric. And so we're actually going to try something a little new this time. If y'all been to my other the other webinars we've done, I'm actually going to share my screen at certain points, and we're going to actually build some of this stuff out. So um, a couple shout outs to let you know that if you are interested in the document we're putting together, you can always get a hold of me. I will throw my email in the chat. But also, one of the things that if you're interested is to have an hour um, consulting session with me. And we can kind of dive in what you're doing with CBE for free. No commitments or anything. Would love to talk to you about what you're doing and how you're doing it. But thinking about that, so Ashley, we're going to kind of talk about now bigger, right? Thinking about how do we get started with putting together a program. And there are lots of different types of programs out there, right, that you can actually do CBE for. You can do a complete degree. So you can do a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, PhD, I've seen, or an EDD. You can also do professional development or uh, employee training or uh, non-credit kind of things, right? Um, But thinking about that, how would you get started? What would be your first thought on determining, what program and what level would you start working with?
Are you talking to me? My internet is bad. Sorry, Rhonda. How would I
Okay.
start? Is that what you asked me? It's going to be an interesting webinar.
How would you think about what would you think about first when you're first thinking about CBE and putting together a program?
I first start thinking about what is the purpose of the program. That is one of my number one questions that I ask. So when we're talking with people in terms of, oh, they're interested in competency basis and that, I go, well, what is the purpose? And it can be all over the place. But with competency based, I find that if people can really understand what the purpose is and what they're really trying to hope the students come away with, that it then forms the conversation in terms of moving forward. And it really helps understand how to actually build those competencies all the way down to the assessments and then rubrics. So we spend a lot of time. What exactly are we working with here? What exactly are you wanting students to know and be able to
Okay.
do?
And so one of the things I love the idea of figuring out the purpose. I know we were talking even yesterday about this very topic, and one of the things that came up was, you know, how is the program being used, right? Um,
Right. Is it industry certification, right? Is it PhD in leadership and change? There's lots of different ways of having a purpose for a program. And so it's really important to understand that. If you're doing something like, industry certifications and standards, it's almost easier for competency based because that already has a mentality in terms of skills and knowledge and abilities. And so, you already have those competencies that students need to know in order to receive their certification. And then things like, a PhD in leadership and change, you're really trying to understand where you want that student to be able to do and go and be in the world after that PhD program. And so then you really have to understand, especially at a PhD program, a much more systemic understanding of your purpose and what environments you want the student to be able to thrive in afterwards. And so
And
it shifts the mentality a little bit.
definitely. So I think a lot of that comes from talking to maybe the employers in your area, right? So if you have a relationship with those employers, you want to create that funnel for them, right? Being
Mhm.
able to understand and what would be, well, if you have some similar employers in the area, it's really nice to be able to get an understanding from each one. How does that all come together, especially like leadership development? How do you build up their managers and their supervisors in that industry, and get that going forward? So once we actually have a program, so as I said, we're actually going to build this out. So I decided that we are going to put together a certification in CBE program development. Doesn't that sound exciting? Since we're talking about CBE, let's go ahead and put a program together for it. And so if, I would love some interaction between everyone in the room and us. And when you think about one, it's a certification. So going back to what Ashley was talking about with purpose. So this is to provide someone um, a way to show that they truly understand the how to build out a CBE program, right? How to develop it. And so when we're thinking about that, okay, I'm going to stop for a moment. I definitely want to thank Monica for joining us. Monica, would you like to introduce yourself really quickly to the group?
Sure, perfect. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, it was just a login issue. So I'm a Monica Shukla Montez. I'm an associate dean with the School of Business at University of Massachusetts Global. I've been working with CBE the last 10-ish years, and working with the Strut platform. We're really excited about the opportunities for CBE and just the growth that it's had and the growth potential that it has as the landscape of higher ed keeps evolving. And really excited to talk to you today about this topic area of assessments and rubrics and kind of creating that whole process for our students and really understanding how we assess mastery in CBE.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So one of the things, and we just kind of got started, right? And we were kind of talking about the development of CBE programs. Obviously, I know that UMass Global has done a lot of development with CBE programs, all the way from your, masters and MAOL and your BBA, and then looking at maybe other things that y'all are thinking about doing, even breaking down some of those courses that you use for the BBA, but maybe putting a certificate together, right? And one of the things that Ashley and I were just talking about was um, the idea of that purpose that we were talking about yesterday. Why do you, or why are you putting together that program? So then I just introduced everyone to the program we're going to be putting together today, which is the certification in CBE program development. So understanding what that would look like. One, how do we figure out how to find those competencies for something like a CBE program development? Where would we go for that? What does that look like? Any ideas? I mean, both Ashley and Monica. I know that someone also posted some stuff in the chat, so I'm going to open that up while we're talking. So, Ashley or Monica, either one, how would you how would you go about determining or finding those competencies when it comes to CBE program
Sure.
development?
So one of the things that we did is we looked at first, what does the industry say about that subject matter area that we could kind of align with? So for example, when we looked at our IT program, we know that there's IT certifications that exist through CompTIA, Microsoft, and so on. And so we wanted to find out first, what could we do to help our students prepare for those certification exams, so that in alignment with showing their mastery and learning about security or information technology or programming, they're also gaining a programming certification, or in Java or C++ or whatever it may be, or gaining some of those other certifications outside of that, outside of the IT field, that has those very well defined kind of competencies that students could show. We also looked at Department of Labor, for example, ONET data. We, in addition, looked at the degree qualifications profile, the DQP. And so that also indicates some of the core skill sets that somebody needs at a different level, whether it's associates, bachelor's, or master's. So oral communication, written communication, leadership, management, some of those core skill building areas, the more qualitative skill sets that we could then build into our competencies. We also took apart some of them, as Dr. Blackburn mentioned, and then put them together as certificates. So we have a certificate in GIS and data analytics, for example, that builds off of some of those skill sets in data analysis and some of the GIS areas, the geospatial.
Oh, you're on mute.
I just realized that I put myself on mute because I was typing into the chat and I didn't want to chat or type over Monica. Um, but I love the idea of, definitely if there is some kind of standard out there, kind of what Ashley, you were talking about a little earlier, getting those and making sure you're using that. Um, getting with employers and making sure that they are you're aligned with what they are looking for in an employee, with skill sets and those competencies. So Ashley, what would be your first step on looking at determining what are the competencies um, for I guess this particular the certification in CBE program development? How would you go about determining what those competencies would be?
I mean, similar to what Monica said, you go and you look at who's in the field and who's doing it, and ask them what needs to be taught, right? What what I love about CBE is it's kind of like when they start on the first day, they already have been doing the work, so it's not such a very sharp learning curve, if that makes sense, as opposed to maybe some other um, traditional programs, because the assessments and everything are real life situations that you will have already in your workplace. So it's a similar sort of thing where I would talk with people like us who develop CVE programs night and day, and really ask them what are the skills that you need in order to do that. What do you need to be thinking about? What are not only the content areas, but also, right, the skills and abilities. And it's surprising, especially for this one, because it's not just knowing how to do things. It's also a bigger system where it's like being able to engage with community members and being able to engage with systems that you're outside of, and how to, facilitate dialogues between, admin and faculty and students, and really help them understand what CBE is. So there's all these different skills that might not, if someone's not in the field, wouldn't know. And so it's really important to go out into the field and ask them what they need.
Definitely. And I also love the idea of being able to go and find those those people that are in the field that are doing it, and making sure that you are hitting on. And I think the um, more people you can kind of talk to about that particular thing, y'all can come to like a consensus. Okay, everyone is saying we need to be able to do this, right? So we definitely know that is a part of a competency. If one person is saying something, then does that fold into another competency, maybe as a sub competency or a skill within that competency? Um, And so, but I like the idea of being able to kind of look at a broad group of people. If it's industry, if it's in academia, if it's professionals in the field. Um, so gonna throw it out there. Um, what when you think about CBE program development, what are some of the competencies that you think of? So I would love anyone that can wants to throw something out there. What are some of the competencies or skills that you think someone would need to actually show that they are competent in being a doing CBE program development? So I'm going to let the chat run a little bit, see what they say. I'm going to look over here and see what other people have put in. Thank you, Monica, for putting some of the um, resources out there. Um, so while people are thinking about that, one of the other things that I think that, and I kind of think it hits on what Terry was saying in the chat, is that when you come to CBE, um, does it have to be online? Does it have to be self-paced? Does it have to be in person? What and I think that kind of goes back to looking at the structure of what you want your CBE program to look like. Um, there's a lot of programs out there, and I always go back to nursing because nursing has very strict guidelines on what someone has to do. I want them to take my blood. They need to know how to do that, right? That there is a skill elements to that. And um, but a lot of nursing programs have been in person, right? Hasn't really been self-paced. They still had to go through, but I think one of the things that's been great with obviously being able to take CBE online is the fact that you can definitely provide students with the ability to go at their own pace. If they already know something, if they have that skill, they can either go through it faster or if you were able to go through your accreditation body and be able to let people test out of something or more of assessment based, then um, students could even go faster, right? But I think that all of that still goes back to the idea of um, what is the purpose of your program and who are you targeting for that? Um, I mean, if it's people that work all the time during the day and all you have is a day program, maybe doing something that is definitely online helps to bring in those people that would like to see those skills, right? Yeah, so Terry, I think that's a lot of people struggle with that on especially if they are doing a accredited program. One thing that a lot of people get started with CBE through like their extended ed program or professional development, something that doesn't have to be accredited. So you're not always on that semester that's based on your accreditation. Um, but I know a lot of people are moving into um, subscription model. You know, bite off all you can chew in one semester. This is how much you pay. Um, and what you're not done with by the end of that semester, it's still on a semester basis. You're still having students register and pay per semester, but um, whatever they're not, wherever they are the next semester, that's where they start, and they're able to go into that. So I'm not seeing a lot of people posting competencies that they may see. But so ask Ashley and Monica, what competencies do you think that people would need to build out um, a CBE program development certification?
How about we start with the CBE principles? So understanding the basics of CBE principles, understanding how to write a competency-based statement, understanding the basic structure of what a competency-based learning process would look like.
Perfect.
And I think building right onto that, in addition, we'll also be looking at some of those other areas like policy related or accreditation related. So what are some of the standards that are also externally set that will still guide our interaction between faculty and students? Because even in a competency-based model, you want that engagement between faculty and students.
Definitely. No, I love those. I also like thinking about a lot about alignment, right? How can you take what you are developing inside your CBE program? How are you taking those competencies and aligning them with, you know, the um, the assessments that we're going to be putting together, or maybe it's backward, so it's that idea that, I need these competencies, but how can I align them to not only the assessments but also to those rubrics, right, that you're going to put together, also to the content that's going to be there. So I'm huge on alignment, because I think that if you can't get it all aligned, it makes it really hard for students to, one, see where they're going with it, right, and the purpose behind what they're doing, and what competencies are they developing as they go. So I love the alignment part of that.
And with that, really understanding how to develop a really good assessment. I mean, that's the cornerstone of all CBE, and how to get there, which means, having those skills to interview other people and understanding, the field in a way in which you can create an authentic assessment that can then be aligned with the rubric and all of that.
Let's dive a little bit more into those assessments, because, well, actually, we'll come back to that in just a minute. So I'm actually going to share my screen, probably briefly, because I want to come back and really discuss some stuff. But I want to show you all this document that I'm putting together. So I'm going to. Oh, that is a great question, Pam. And when I share my screen, I'm actually going to lose being able to see y'all and anything. So Monica and Ashley are going to help me with that. So what I did was I went ahead and put that this is the program we're going to put together. And I didn't put anything in purpose, but you can think about what that would look like when you're doing it. And I went ahead and put a lot of the different competencies that some of them we've been talking about, others I went ahead and added some in here. One of the things I think that Ashley mentioned earlier was even the collaboration, and maybe even communication. What does that look like within your program that when you're building it? Also with that communication and collaboration with the community, with other people. It's so weird not being able to see anyone. I only see my screen. So we're going to take all of these and we're going to now dive deeper. So you see here, I highlighted this one. It is rubric development, because I do believe that if you're going to be able to build a CBE program, you should know how to build out rubrics. So we are going to use this competency and build it out.
You might want to expand. It's pretty small, Rhonda.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Magnify a little bit.
What? Y'all can't see it as well as I can. Oh.
Maybe others can.
Now I have to remember how to do this inside.
Right. Go down 100%. Go down. Yep. Right
There it is. Yeah. Is that better or a little bit more?
A little bit more.
that.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for, yeah, because I see it just fine.
We lost Monica.
And oh no. Okay, hopefully she'll be able to jump back on. So when we're developing this particular competency, one of the things that we want to think about is what are the skills or sub-competencies, learning objectives, things like that, that you're going to use to actually break down that competency a little bit more. So when we are looking at rubric development, what are some of the skill sets you would need to actually build or develop a rubric? What are you thinking, Ashley?
I mean, the step before rubric development, I keep saying this again and again, but it's understanding your assessment at a deep level and how it connects to the whole entire learning process and the field outside, which also aligns with the purpose. So if you can really understand that alignment piece, and the I'm a loss for words right now. The importance, it's vital to have that alignment. That would be a subcompetency or a skill that would need to be done. So someone mentioned,
I love that alignment between the two. One of the things that I think about a lot is what does your criteria, in a rubric you have your criteria and your levels, right? What is your criterias within our criterions within your rubric in a CBE program? So if you think about a rubric I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can actually see y'all. So when I think about the criteria in just my regular, when I teach an online course, it's not CBE, it's just a regular online course. I also look at things like, maybe word count. I haven't done that in a while, but I used to do word count, right? Did they give you enough information? Did they expand on things so it should come to a certain amount of word count? 1,200 to 1,500 words, right? So would we do that in a CBE program?
no, I wouldn't.
Yeah. And unless you find that you are teaching a specific topic that maybe it is about you're teaching a journalism class and you have to be able to write an article under 500 words. Then word count is incredibly important for that particular competency, right? But if you are teaching almost anything else, then most of the time that is not a criteria that you usually use in a CBE program. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it goes back.
I could, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Monica. Please.
Oh, I think I can give an example that also helps tie into the question in the chat. So when I look at a competency, so for example, oral communication, I would develop a competency statement. So kind of looking back at the purpose of this competency. So I would say for oral communication, the objective or the competency statement at first would be a student should be able to effectively communicate using oral skill sets to an audience. Then I would have objectives underneath that support it, almost like a backwards design. So we talked about alignment, scaffolding, all of that. We use a backwards design approach. So if I want my competency statement to be, this individual needs to be able to present to an audience in an oral format, then my final assessment will probably be an oral presentation to a small audience on maybe any topic, because the reality is these students may be coming from different experiences, have different backgrounds. We want it to tie to their area of career choice.
so they can pick the topic, but they're going to be delivering a short presentation. Then I may have different criteria within the rubric that might be vocalization, eye contact, communication skill sets, presentation style, presentation format, even your presentation as a person. How did you appear and approach the presentation? Were you well structured and able to communicate, or maybe are you developing those skill sets? So we have 4 criteria across our rubric. So we have exemplary, proficient, developing, and emerging as our 4. And students pass as long as they're exemplary or proficient. And then also kind of along those lines would be the last piece of looking at the objectives. So these objectives might be, were they able to draft and complete a communication speech? Were they able to present within a 3 to 5 minute time frame, or whatever the time frame is we wanted to deliver? Or it might just be, were they able to communicate effectively regarding the topic area?
So Monica, somehow your voice like almost went out. So I don't know if
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize it went out towards the end.
Yeah.
But basically, you want to have a competency statement with objectives that help, and then rubric criteria that align with those objectives, scaffolding up to that competency statement.
And so a lot of times when I've seen rubrics put together for CBE is I actually use those actual either learning objectives or sub-competencies, again, whatever skills, those are my criteria, because that's how I'm breaking down how I'm going to know if my competency has been achieved. So I take my competency, I break it down into the different skills, sub-competencies, learning objectives that I expect people to be able to do, and then create those different levels as Monica was talking about. I usually use a 4 level as well. Some people use 3, some people use 5. 5 to me sometimes gets a little too much, but being able to, just like any rubric, then when you use it, it really helps to provide feedback to the student when they're doing what they're doing. But when you're building out those particular uh, levels, it's really showing that, like Monica said, she starts with emerging. What does that look like? And then may go to developing. Okay, now they've gotten a little bit more than emerging. They know a little bit more, but not quite. So the other part of CBE is when you look at a 4 level rubric, what does a student need to make on every criteria to show that they have met that criteria? So it's a little different than when you do a regular online course, when each thing is worth, this is worth 10 points, this is worth 5 points, this is worth 3, this is worth 20, whatever. And then you grade them no matter where they fall on the 1 through 4, they still, even if they didn't do well on one, they could still pass that particular assessment. When within CBE, you're really looking at every single criteria needs to be met, and to be able to say, yes, every one of those criteria the student met. So it was either were they proficient at it? So maybe level 3. Did they master it? Could be level 4. And you as an institution determine maybe they need to master everything before they can show that they've mastered the particular competency, or maybe it is that they need to be proficient in it. And part of that may determine on determine what you're doing. So is this particular program that if they don't actually master it, they can kill someone, right? Or then you may want them to master it, not just proficiency.
It's like, when you're developing them for like EMTs, emergency medical technicians, right? Or you were talking about nursing, there's certain skills that they've got to know. They have to know, like you said, like, you know, um, drawing blood or like taking blood pressure. It's a very basic skill. And if someone can't do it, then they shouldn't be an EMT. Right. And so someone said, is there a standard in terms of the chances to master it? Usually it's like, for at least the ones that I develop, it's around 2 or 3. And then if not, then they need to start again in the beginning. But it's really important that that's that big difference between CB and traditional education is that, say, for example, if you're in a psych class, you're developing a psych class, someone might not know the psychosexual development stages of Freud. That's okay. It's okay if they don't really know that, right? Like they'll still be able to be successful. But if you don't know how to take blood pressure, if you don't know how to like do pulse rate, these are all this is why CBE is so important in these types of different fields, because it really makes you have to achieve each one of those, which is why a rubric is so important. Because if you look at a CBE course, you can really understand the quality of it by its rubric, because the rubric really tells you the whole story. You should be able to understand what the purpose is. You should be able to understand all the different skills that the student should be able to achieve if you develop a really good rubric. And a lot of people have generic rubrics, which are okay, but with CBE, the more specific and less generic in a lot of ways, the better it is, because then the content aligns with that. And so, I spend a lot of time after I do a rubric actually going back to the content and making sure that there's alignment. Like if there's a bunch of content that I didn't put in the rubric, then why is it in the class? Is it essential, right? Or is it just a distractor? And so we spend a lot of time going back and forth between those two. To make sure, and I keep using the word alignment. That's the word of the day. But it's just so essential. Okay.
Definitely. And I really love going back to the idea that it is, I think the one of the biggest differences when it comes to like a regular, even not even just even an online course, but a regular academic course and a CBE course, is the idea of this mastery. And you know, it's not giving a student an A, B, C, D, F. It is do they have the skills that align to that competency, then aligns up to the bigger program, right? Um, and so I want to just quickly go back and you can tell I'm not used to doing this yet in this platform, but share my screen real quick. So we went ahead and decided that the competency was to build a rubric, or rubric development. So some of the things that we talked about was, criteria, alignment. Other things that you can think about is maybe clarity and understanding within your rubric. That when you're doing it, standardization and consistency, things like that, when you're building it out. So one of the things.
Can I just take a moment on why that's so important?
Yes.
One of the reasons why that's so important is because you have different, oh my goodness, your screen's crazy. There's different people who are going to be using that rubric, and you want to make sure there's internal consistency. You don't want someone to be able to use that on the same student's work, and one person passes and another one does not. And so you have to have the wording in the rubric is like an art form in a lot of ways, because you have to make sure that the majority of people that are interacting will all have the same understanding of what you're trying to articulate. And so that's where you also need to have other people looking at your rubric, to make sure that they also are understanding what you're trying to communicate. And then
Yes. Yeah. Being a former researcher, one of the things that I always brings back to is the reliability and validity, right? Yeah. And not only the validity of what you're actually, um, is what you're measuring, right? And that's so important. It's something I think that sometimes we miss even when we're putting rubrics together, is like going back and looking at that. And it's like when you read the little descriptions that you have, for that criteria, are you actually grading or assessing, I'm sorry, what you are saying that you're going to assess? And again, I think that even with regular rubrics for an online course, sometimes that's missing at times as well. But I think one of the things that we talked about also is this alignment between what, so your you have your competencies that you're going to look at, then you break it down into your sub competencies or sub skill or skills. Then you have to figure out how you're going to assess all of these, right? So with this particular example of rubric development, how would we assess that someone can actually develop a rubric? What would that look like?
Terry
Maybe
had a
developing.
question. I know you can't see it, Rhonda. Terry had a question. Should the same rubric scale be the same for all courses in the program? Yes, ideally.
And we'll talk about that in just one second once we actually get down to the rubric and what that scale looks like. But one of the things, so let's talk about assessments a little bit. When we actually we have our competency, we've broken it all down into the sub-competency skills, abilities, those things, the knowledge that you want them to, they have to master that competency. Now the next thing is to do is kind of working backwards is developing what that assessment is. How do you know with that assessment that they are going to show you that they have the skills or the abilities or the knowledge from every single one of those criteria, right, that we talked about? So when it comes to rubric development, it could be, I mean, definitely developing a rubric. That would probably be a good one. There's a little thing out there called AI that I can tell you right now, I used to develop my rubrics because, and of course, I read them and I go through them and make sure that they're what they need to be. But is there something we can do to make it not completely? You're never going to do it. I know we talked about this yesterday, and Ashley and Monica and I talked about this yesterday a little bit. Is can you make sure? Can you almost make it AI proof? And you're right, Terry. AI is a great tool, and I use it all the time. But if we are going to make sure that our students have the skills, and with this particular thing, what is the skill we're looking for? And how do we have students demonstrate that? So I'm guessing it's Josanne. I use OpenAI. I use Chat GPT is what I use most of the time.
Me too.
You're welcome. But getting back to, I mean, we started at the very beginning of our conversation talking about purpose of our program, right? And then when we went into competencies, we had to understand that purpose to be able to develop those competencies. Then when we went to the sub-competencies, again, we had to understand the purpose behind what we're doing to create those. So if I want someone to demonstrate to me that they have the ability to demonstrate all of those sub-competencies I just put in there for rubric development. What would I do to do that? Any idea?
Mhm.
Yes. So those competencies are broken down into knowledge, skills, and assessments of or abilities, assessments, abilities. I saw the A and just went to assessment. But how do you have them demonstrate the knowledge, the skills, and the ability to be able to develop a rubric when I can very easily take prompt and go to ChatGPT and plug it in and say, give me a rubric.
I mean, I
Pam,
think I'm not quite sure, but I mean, for, sorry, I was going to say for me, it's, you know, I start with AI. I mean, it's a great tool, but what it is, it's very generic to me. And so it does not necessarily reach to that purpose statement of the program that I'm developing. And so it's a great start. It's got great language, you know, if you like it more flowery, you can literally say more flowery or less flowery. Like it's a great tool. But it doesn't necessarily understand the whole context in which the designer or the rubric developer can bring. And so that's where, as a rubric designer, you really need to make sure that it's connecting back to that purpose statement and the context in which the program is about. I think that's what you were asking, Rhonda, but I'm not sure.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I think also with relating back to that knowledge piece of it, when you're designing the rubric, or if you're the faculty member designing the rubric course for somebody else to design rubrics, I'm very, meta for that. But basically, if you're doing that, what you could also do is ask that the student refer back to some of the content in their reading materials to avoid if they're using AI, for example, to do their work. So as designers, I know we may use AI to creatively come up with rubrics or kind of a starting point, but I think also adding in that specific in there to say, based on the content that you just read, what are two theories that emerged that stood out to you? Because AI won't know the two theories that were read. So when you're assessing student work, you want to make sure that you're able to see that they actually read the material. So that's one way to do that, is to actually build that into your rubric criteria.
No, I love that. The other thing that I think about is actually making it very personal, right?
Right.
Have students reflect on something, and have them take that and apply it to something in their life or their work or a setting that they know something about. And so I think that um, by kind of making it almost more specific as the assignment, and then telling them, now build a rubric for blah blah blah, or do this. Kind of a little bit both what Ashley and Monica said is, how can you then take that? One of the other things I also love to do is find out what the actual process they went through to do something. So to develop that. What, and if they used it, tell me if you used it. I don't care if you used AI, just tell me where you started and what you did and how you changed it and what that looked like and where it started and where it ended. And, so being able to get really deep into their process and their thinking behind it, as they're going through that particular thing.
Yeah, I think by doing that, you really stress as you were talking about, replicability, right? So you want them to be able to do that competency all the time, right? You want them to be able to take the pulse all the time. You want them to be able to do that rubric. So part of that is the metacognition that they have if they know actually how they did it, which is why it's really great to have that reflection piece in there. So then they actually have to understand how they did it themselves, so then they can do it again. Because too often, unfortunately, we do something and then we're like, I have no idea how I did that, and I don't think I can do it again. And we don't want that to happen. So we really want them to develop that skill to really understand how they did it in the first place, so then they can do it again the next time. And it also is a great way to have a communication with your student if you have ideas on how to make it perhaps, more efficient, or, have you thought about this? So it also is a really nice place for communication between the instructor and the student as well.
Yes, I love that. And I really love the idea of also asking them, okay, what would you do different next time? Right? How would you approach this differently, or what would you change when it comes to that as well?
Terry saying very similar things, Rhonda.
I was over on my other sheet, sorry. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. We have about 9 minutes, but I know we can do this. But let's dig a little deeper into that actual rubric. How do you develop the rubric? So one of the things that someone asked, I think it would have been Terry, was what do you use the same levels? I'm trying to remember the actual question. Yes. When you're doing it. And I would say yes. So I'm going to, again, just real quickly share my screen and try to pull it over to the other page as quickly as I can. Okay. So when I develop a rubric, I have the 4 levels, and it could be anything. It could be, I think that Monica, you said like emerging, developing, proficient, even mastery. This just says inadequate, distinguished, so you can have you can call it anything that you want. But you notice I only have 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't have this is worth 10 points, this is worth 20 points. Literally, it doesn't matter points on here, because if they don't make it to, maybe for rubric development, if they don't make it to proficient, then they really need to redo it. If they're just inadequate or emerging or whatever you want to call it, or developing, I feel like someone's and so I would use that across my entire program. So if I'm going to do 4 level, I'm going to keep it 4 level for the entire program. So that way it's consistent for the students. When they see emerging, they know exactly what that means. They see developing, okay, I'm almost there, because maybe this particular program, I just need to get proficient, right? Or hopefully most students want to get mastery, but or maybe like Ashley was talking about with that EMT program, they need to get all the way to mastery, or a nursing program, just to say that they definitely, no matter what, know those skills, or have those skills, or know the knowledge for that particular thing. And so being able to take those, like we were talking about earlier, the sub-competencies, skills, abilities, knowledge, whatever you want to call them, as your criteria, because that's how you're going to take that competency and break it all down, and that's going to be your criteria. Then you have your 4 levels, and then you have to figure out, what does each one of those mean for that particular criteria. And that's pretty similar for a regular rubric, because that's what you should be doing anyway. But the more information you can provide to the students on the what each level, how far they have gotten really for that particular criteria on each level, so they understand, okay, these are the things I need to work on more and I can go back and I can look at my content. I can go do more research. I can talk to my professor. I can, whatever it is, maybe go talk to my boss because he knows a lot about this, whatever, and be able to build up those skills to be able to get there. Ashley, Monica, y'all want to add anything to that?
I was wondering if we should circle back to that whole 500 word thing. Because a lot of times, in a lot of rubrics, people have, had 5 or more grammatical mistakes or something like that. And then therefore they don't pass. And so again, it really comes back to that purpose. And so if the person is trying to do something like blood pressure and this and that, if they have grammatical issues, that's not a really big deal if you're really going to just understand how to do blood pressure. But it is if you're doing, say, for example, writing up reports for an emergency medical technician, right? And it depends if a lot of you have read those medical reports, they're not necessarily grammar friendly per se, right? Because they use a lot of shorthand. But so it has to be, again, very specific in terms of what you're meaning by that and really understanding for this competency, what are we really trying to do? Is it understanding grammar at this point? Did we even go over grammar? Is that really an essential element? Or is it something else that's more important? And so the rubric should really make sure that it aligns with that.
Yeah. And I know another thing that a lot of people think about and don't always know how to put it in are kind of those soft skills. That is also something that when you start breaking down those competencies, what will probably end up happening is those knowledge, skills, and abilities, you're going to find those soft skills. And so maybe on a particular competency, if they can't, even as a nurse, if you can't communicate correctly, I need you to roll up your sleeve. I need you to hold your arm over here. If you can't do that, then you may have stuff everywhere. The client may be really frustrated because they don't know what they're supposed to do or things like that. So, I would, instead of having like a whole thing or one whole competency just on like that soft skill, which you can, like oral communication is really important for that overall program, you could have a full competency on oral communication or just communication skills. But if it's just something that's kind of woven into all the different competencies that you're doing, then I would probably take, critical thinking is a great one. We all want that soft skill in our employees when we get them. And so how can you build that in to your rubrics as as you're building out each one? Does it mean that it has to be in every single rubric that you put together or every single competency that you're putting together? No. But maybe within the program, you want it to be embedded in there. And a lot of times soft skills are really hard because not even sometimes the students really understand what it means with that soft skill. But if you can put it in there in a way that applies to that particular program, then students start to grasp it and understand what it means a little bit more, and can then develop that particular skill.
No, that's great, Rhonda. I mean, a great example is what we've been talking about with blood pressure, in patient care or something to that nature in communication. If you don't have that soft skill, then someone's blood pressure will go up and you will not get an accurate reading of blood pressure because you've stressed the patient out. And so the purpose was to get an accurate, right, blood pressure. That was the purpose of the competency. And then if you don't have that soft skill involved, then, you didn't do it. And so that's where, yeah, I agree. I really like you can have it as your own competency, but really having it with each one of the competencies is also important because then the student, right, if they're going to take the blood pressure, maybe they'll remember that as part of the rubric and be like, oh, right, I need to reassure the patient and make sure they're not stressed out by having their blood pressure taken, right? And so they can see that that is just as important as knowing how to read, right, the blood pressure machine.
Yes. I'm sorry. I have, Monica, I don't know if you, know you probably need to go to class, right? But definitely want to thank everyone for coming today. We are at the hour. And definitely, if you want that hour consultant, I would love to meet with you and talk about your thoughts and your plans on CBE and where you are, and maybe how to get you there with the different things. Also, if you would like the document I was putting together, just to kind of give you an example of what something looks like, I would love to also do that as well. So I want to definitely thank Dr. Nelson and Dr. Shukla for joining me, and hope y'all come to our next month's webinar. So hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.